Well, this is the Committee of the Whole. Would the clerk please call? I call the meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons. Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan. Miss Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here.
All right. We have minutes from the previous meeting from July the 11th and August the 1st, a special meeting of the City Council Committee of the Whole. Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Diane Marlin approves, and Eric, did you make the second?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Jacob Jacobson. Were there any comments about the meetings, the minutes, any corrections? Okay, I see none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Are there additions to our agenda at this time? I don't see any. Okay, we've come to public input. Currently, we have just one form filled out. If you'd have interest in speaking to the City Council Committee of the Whole, please forward your letter. This is from Bishop King James Underwood, who wishes to express his continued concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. So thank you, Bishop. And in like manner, Elderess Melinda Carr would also like to extend concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues and its historic impact. So thank you very much, Melinda. Elderess Melinda Carr. Others? Aaron Ammons.
So I really held my peace as long as I could as it relates to the additions to the agenda, because I've been saying for the past 3 weeks that I thought we would have a discussion about the IDOT traffic stop study and some of the recommendations that were made by that commission or by that task force. And I see early this week various different hearings that are up and a committee of the whole with 20 some odd agenda items, yet the item I asked for 3 weeks ago is still not on the agenda anywhere. So I just wanted to make note of that once again for the public. That is all.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaron. Mayor Pressing.
Aaron, we have it on the agenda for August 22nd. Okay? So I think we might have missed 1 month, but we did it in June, I think you said. And also we're going to do it in August. So we'll do it every month, okay?
Well, that's what we said a long time ago, and then you just said we missed a month.
Well, we had a gentleman's father died, and he had other things to deal with, so...
So no business were taken care of in the city of Urbana? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Okay.
sometimes
You're
things
saying it's
get...
not priority. That's what you're
No,
saying.
that's
All right.
not correct. I'm
Thank
saying
you.
we have it on the agenda for August 22nd, okay?
Thank you, my fellow council members. We do look forward to having a conversation about this topic.
I can't tell.
And I think several of us would support a request to the mayor that this be on the agenda officially. Any other public input? Yes.
I'm not sure if Natalie was going to discuss further the Market at the Square events, but I'd encourage her to do that now.
All right. A report on the Market of the Square.
This is National Farmers Market Week. Urbana is celebrating this Saturday, August 13th. There's a card here. We're doing a lot of celebrations this week, also in conjunction with the Champaign Farmers Market that happens Tuesday evenings over in downtown Champaign. This Saturday at the market, we'll have art at the market, performance at the market. The mayor will read the proclamation again for all of us, and we'll have a kale eating contest in which one of the competitors is here. Oh, 2 competitors are here with us this evening. Diane Marlin and Mike Munson will join us, along with some other folks from WCIA and in the community. So it'll be a very good time this Saturday. We'll also have samples available. And this is a card that we developed with the Champaign Market. It's a tic-tac-toe card. There are things you can do on the back of the card. 3 in a row completes the card. can do some of them in Champaign and Urbana, or all at one market the other. So, and the winner will receive a gift basket with some goodies provided by market vendors.
Is that raw kale, or is it going to be blanched? I mean, anything is just...
It's a great question. It's going to be a prepared salad style on a plate, dressing optional.
Is that going
Raw.
to be by volume or speed?
There'll be a substantial quantity on a plate for each competitor.
We haven't been given the rules yet.
That's worth coming to just to see that
Yes,
alone, I
it
think.
is.
9:15, kale eating.
And the winner receives a very unique trophy, which will be revealed on Saturday.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I think I'd like to also mention that invite the public to a ribbon cutting ceremony and plaque dedication for the Joseph Royer Arts and Architectural District. There's going to be a plaque dedicated at the Lincoln Lodge Motel at 403 West University Avenue. That's on the south side of University, next to Leo Park. The time will be 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, August 11th. You're invited to come. The mayor will be present and cut the ribbon. And the plaque is being sponsored by Mrs. Ping Chen and Mr. Xian Wang, who are the owners of the hotel, the motel. All right. Now, there's going to be a presentation at this time on zoning variance procedures. Lori Person.
Thank you. Sorry about the dry title, but the topic many of you might also find dry, so I suppose it's appropriate. My presentation equally has a lot of words in it, so bear with me. I'll try to be brief so that you don't fall asleep. But what this does is continue a discussion that began on April 25th at a committee meeting. Public input as well as subsequent discussion focused on the zoning variance procedures that we have in place. What generated that was a couple of cases that initially came in as major variances were revised prior to the Zoning Board of Appeals, or ZBA, meeting. So that triggered no longer needing a major variance. It triggered then needing just a minor variance, which, as a reminder, major variances require a 2/3 vote by ZBA, who then recommends it for final approval to council, whereas a minor variance gets final approval by ZBA by just a majority vote. So there was some concern expressed at that meeting about transparency, not quite sure what the case was going to be about when people came to the meeting, as well as ensuring that both the public and the ZBA have the information that's needed. So what I wanted to do today was come forward with a few potential approaches on how to handle these issues. Some of them were discussed at the meeting in April. Others we wanted to put forward just to make sure that a range of options were presented. I would also remind you that out of this list, 4 of these would need to be text amendments to the zoning ordinance, so that would require a public hearing at Plan Commission. So we didn't want to get into the fine language here because we want to make sure that discussion happens at Plan Commission during the official public hearing. But we wanted to make sure that we got a little bit of feedback from all of you prior to going forward to drafting some specific language. So for each of these, I'm going to go through briefly. I've tried to identify pros and cons of each. I'm sure there are others that I've missed, but we can talk about all of that. But I wanted to at least provide a little framework. So starting off, the first one, this is an administrative one that does not require text amendment. We've already started doing it, in fact. And that's improving the language that's provided on the agendas, in the legal ads, and in the letters to neighbors about specific cases to make sure that everyone understands that, as it's written today anyway, the code allows some flexibility in that you can request something, a major variance, but then subsequently revise it, and that smaller variance or perhaps even a minor variance could be approved. So I do think that we could make some further improvements on that. We've tinkered a little bit just to get something out right away, but I think with some more thought we could make that even more specific and fine-tune that even further. So that's an easy one. The second option here perhaps would be the biggest change, and that would be to eliminate altogether the ability to reduce a major variance to a minor variance unless someone were to withdraw that application and start again. So do a new application What that would do, of course, is increase transparency, no doubt about it. There would be re-advertising, a new legal ad. There would be new letters to neighbors, a new sign in the yard. Some cons, of course, can be associated with that. That would add a month to the process because ZBA meets once a month. That would add that second application fee, that second legal notice fee to the applicant. And also may not encourage someone to try to reduce their variance request. And one thing I wanted to point out, although the cases that generated this discussion were about developers wanting to redevelop a couple of sites, most of our variances really are from homeowners that want to do something small like an addition. So these added fees in particular could have a large impact. And also I should note that throughout the process, we as staff are always trying to work with the applicants to make sure that they've really thought of everything. And sometimes that does happen late in the process, and perhaps that's something we could work on to have that happen earlier in the process. But in the end, we want everyone to have a variance that truly does meet the findings. One of those findings, of course, is that it is the minimum deviation necessary from the code. So we do try to work with applicants, and in particular those homeowners that might not be as nuanced in zoning, to help them figure out a way to make things work, perhaps with some adjustments so that they don't need to be requesting as much. But as I mentioned, this would be the biggest change because it would have the whole month delay as well as the added fees. So the third option was one that was discussed at the meeting in April, and that would be if an item starts out as a major variance, but then through revisions turns to a minor variance, that an automatic continuation to the next ZBA meeting would be triggered. So it's the same process in that it would, a minor variance would just be considered by the ZBA. But what it would do is, again, increase some transparency because it would be a new agenda issued the month later with a note about how perhaps it started as a major but now it's a minor. It allows the ZBA and the public more time to consider the case and the specifics of the case. The cons here, of course, that adds that month to the process. In some cases, we're thinking it might not be necessary. Let's say it's a major variance because, or by 3 inches, and they manage to find a way to bring it down so that it's a minor variance and they only lose 4 inches. So is that necessarily something that's causing controversy? Maybe everyone's supportive of it, so perhaps an automatic trigger isn't necessarily the answer for all cases. So we'd want to think carefully on, are there instances where you wouldn't want to trigger an automatic continuance. And again, it may also not encourage reduction in variance requests because there is that delay in there. A fourth option, and these last 2 options I will say kind of work with treating the case as though it still is a major variance in a couple of ways. So this fourth option or approach would require council approval, and you could do it either 2 ways, either the straight way if it's as though it were still a major variance and requires ZBA to have that 2/3 vote, or you could reduce that down to majority vote. But either way, council would still get the case for the final approval. What that does is maintains the same number of public meetings, so it really keeps the same schedule as the applicant initially intended. If they worked out, okay, well, if it takes 6 weeks to get through all the meetings, in this case, it would still take the 6 weeks. The cons here is that it sets the bar higher than for other minor variances, so I'm not sure. We need to think about if that's fair. And then adding the council onto what would normally just be a ZBA decision would add between 1 and 2 weeks, depending on scheduling of a typical minor variance. And again, because of that added time, might not encourage reduction in the variance request. So this final option is similar in some ways in that it proposes suggesting ZBA still have to vote a 2/3 vote, but they would be the final determiner here. What that does is requires the same level of scrutiny by ZBA as what a major variance would require. The cons, just like in the previous one, is that it then sets the bar higher than other minor variances. But perhaps more importantly even, it doesn't really address a transparency issue, so I'm not sure if this is the right solution either. So we're not proposing any solutions. We're hoping to get a little feedback from you, but this is what we've come up with in looking at our existing code and potential ways to address the issues that were expressed in April. So I'd be happy to answer questions, and would really appreciate some feedback.
Yeah, and first of all, I'll just say that I really do appreciate your interest in addressing the question, and it seems to me very appropriate. Is there comments or feedback at this point, Charlie?
Yeah, also thanks. Could you email us the presentation so we can think about it? And, you know, it's one plus something else is sort of my initial reaction, but I can't find what the something else quite is from the other 4 options. Nothing's real attractive, so I really think we need to be creative and think about it a bit.
Other comments? Well, first Bill and then Eric.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning toward 1 as being the best option. I think the people that had the concerns are pretty sophisticated as far as attending meetings and understanding meetings go. But I think having that extra reminder on the agenda that if that it could be approved at a lower level and a minor variance could be approved would probably suffice for most of the people that were concerned about the issue that came up for this one. The only thing I might add in 1 is in the staff recommendations on the case, have that as an option specifically listed. I think you usually list several options whether you recommend them or not, and you could always list the option of approving a minor variance, so that not just the language, a minor variance could be approved. You could be a little bit more specific if the variance is reduced below 25% or whatever the cutoff is for something. You could approve that, so then the people reading that would also know at what level they would be concerned. If they aren't concerned over the extra 4 feet, that would be a minor variance, but they would be over 6 feet, then they'd know how to testify. So I think the transparency issue is the main one to address. I do see some problems with the fairness requiring a continuance or requiring council approval for minor variance. I don't really think that would work. Number 5 seems like a possibility, but I'd have to think about that, and even that seems like an extra threshold to apply when if they just I don't know, maybe that would make sense. I'll have to think about number 5, but number 1 makes most sense to me.
And can I ask a question of clarification? These 5 recommendations do not necessarily they apply to different cases, right? So we might be interested in accepting or talking about 2 or 3 of them, or are these 5 options for a single solution?
I'll answer and let me know if I misinterpreted your question. But this is really designed for the instance where someone comes in the door with an application for a major variance, and at some point, and that's a good point, I should touch on that, at some point revises their application so that they don't need that level of variance any longer. The issue came up because that change in those cases happened right before the ZBA meeting. Had they happened the week before when we were preparing the memo, for instance, the memo would have addressed that, and the only person that would have known what the original application was for would be whoever reads the legal ads in the newspaper. So probably not a whole lot of folks. So that is something, it's a nuance that would need to be addressed in the language. I didn't want to bog you down with that today, but that is something that if you have some feedback on that, this really was geared for those more those last-minute changes that could not have been reflected on the agenda or in the staff memo.
Okay, so this is a one-topic solution-oriented option.
Well, we need to make sure that any changes would apply to just that option. So, we'd have to figure out the right language on when when this is triggered, so that we wouldn't eliminate the possibility that day one someone submits an application, they're not locked into that, because as I mentioned earlier, we often work with applicants to help them better understand zoning in order to make their application a bit better.
And then Eric, did you want to have a question?
Yeah, probably this wouldn't happen with a minor variation, but I I'm in principle really concerned about the mixed system we have, where some commissions have a final voice and other decisions come to council. And the problem that we have, and it's a problem we ran into on a particular property in my ward, is that as a neighbor and as a person representing my ward, I weighed in at a commission hearing that was a final decision. But then a different, then a decision about the same property came up to a different commission, which did require council approval, and the attorney for the property owner challenged my ability to adjudicate the matter as a council member because of my prior participation in a hearing on the same. Mr. Simon told me, you know, I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, if he sued you, we would lose, because I had forfeited my my ability to participate in my adjudicatory function by participating and I'm just wondering whether a situation like that is lying in wait here. Maybe not on a minor variance, except that let's suppose that the neighbors want to weigh in on this because of the historic nature of the property, what they perceive as the historic nature of the property. And it's in my ward, I want to be a good neighbor, I want to be a good representative, I go talk there, and then, but I talk about the variance just as a neighbor and a representative of the neighbors, and then it comes, there's a historic preservation hearing, and I've disqualified myself. So I guess I would really be more comfortable with all of our commissions. I know it's an extra step, I know it takes a little bit more time, but I'd really be comfortable with all of our commission decisions coming to council so that it's really clear that on all of these issues where we have an adjudicatory function and we can, know that and we can behave in that fashion.
Okay, thanks. Other comments? Mayor Pressing.
I think that if someone's going to change it from a major to a minor, that's just at the last minute, it should go to the next ZBA meeting because you want adequate notice. But I don't think they should have to start a new application. It's, I don't think they should have to pay twice if they're just adjusting something that they started out doing and then they start figuring that maybe they don't need to do it that way. Because that's what you're there for, is to help them fix it so they end up with the best possible solution.
Yes, Diane Marlin.
Well, I'm in agreement with doing whatever we can to improve language at the beginning to let people know what is possible. So number one, for sure, having remodeled a house and built onto a house in West Urbana, and keeping in mind when you're engaging in a construction project like that, there can be a tight timeline. You're lining up contractors, you've got things ready to go, and putting it off for another month can really be a hardship when you're dealing with a fairly short construction season. So I'm not sure I would want to support automatically continuing to the next meeting, but I just need to think about these rest of these options. But things come up at the last minute when you're dealing with construction, and going from major to minor is actually an improvement in things. If it were going from minor to major, sure, we would want to.
And that would require re-advertising. So
right,
definitely.
Yeah, so I think we ought to try to stay as flexible as we can, keeping in mind people's construction timetables, and as you point out, this includes more homeowners than anybody else in a lot of neighborhoods. So I'll have to think about this more.
Yes, Charlie?
Well, I just really like Bill's additional item to number 1, is to include it in the options that are presented in the
Correct.
memo, just automatically, so that it's
Right.
always before us that's a possibility. That may actually be enough from my point of view.
I'd like to ask a corollary question. What is the staff's action when there are more than one minor variance requested for a property? Does that automatically now go to the ZBA, or is that handled administratively?
No, all minor variances go to the ZBA, so there are times where we have one property requesting 2 minor variances at the same time. We just process that together, depending on if the ZBA has differing opinions on each one. They may or may not vote on them separately. They may vote on them together if they have the same opinion on both, but that all goes to the ZBA.
So we're no longer making those decisions at the administrative level.
That's correct, and we're not.
That's excellent. Anything else? All right, so, okay, Aaron.
So the concern that was raised that I remember was that there was a manipulation, or the public felt like there was some sort of manipulation from a major to a minor at the last minute to avoid having to come to council or something like that. Something to that effect, right? And to Dennis's question, the minor variance would have to be something separate on the property. It couldn't be connected to the initial proposal for a minor variance, because then that would make it a major variance at some point, right?
So there would be, you could also have a property owner that requests a major variance on, let's say, front yard setback and a minor variance on rear yard setback for the same property. So we would analyze each of those separately, but wrap them up together. But to summarize, the way the code reads today is that you can go down a step. So you can start with a major and end up with a minor. But as Diane mentioned, definitely you can't go up. So without going through the process again and doing the notifications. So you can always go down, but you can't go up.
So if someone came to you all and said, well, we want to do a minor variance on a front yard setback, and then a year later they came to you and said, we want to add to that same setback,
Well, that would be a new process.
that would be a new, I
Right.
mean, at some point that becomes a major variance, right? That if you're trying to improve the same thing 2 times
Oh, I
or
see
3
what, so a
times, right?
cumulative effect. We would need to look at that individually, because if you're discussing something like an addition, one would hope that they thought of that in advance, because it's pretty expensive to go back and redo it. So generally, what I've found is that people ask for what they really want. They don't always
First
get it
time.
granted.
Mhm.
Yeah, the first time, because it's really expensive to do a do-over, really.
Okay.
Other questions or comments at this time? Okay, well, yeah, we'll give you feedback. Please do send your options to us. I appreciate it very much. And when do you want to have feedback? Do you want to see it in a week, 2 weeks,
Well, I don't know if people are going on vacation. You might want to
sooner than later?
give yourself a couple of weeks at least, but I'll
Okay.
leave that up to you as the chair.
All right. Well, let's try for 2 weeks and see what happens. All right. Thank you very much. And now we may or may not have a staff report concerning the library board. Is Celeste? Okay. Diane Marlin?
I would have a suggestion. We have people in the audience waiting for us to act on items 19, 20, and 21, and it looks like the rest of the items don't have members of the public here waiting, so I was wondering, I would move that we consider those 3 items first on the agenda, so we can get those out of the way.
Yes. Yeah, we do have number
and
number
Jane
9.
DeLuce, too.
Right. Marketing proposal. And we have somebody here to speak about item number 9. But I'm willing to raise the
Yeah.
the questions about the G2 licenses forward to a more...
Put them after number 7?
Yes, that's acceptable.
Okay.
Anybody disagree about that choice?
No, yeah, let's just do all the ones that have people waiting, do them next.
Okay, all right. All right, so then let's just go, what about the library report? Is that going to be is that an error for this week's? Okay, well, we'll have to postpone that till next time. Let's now go to number 7, Resolution 2016-08-049R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement. Jane DeLuce and Natalie, welcome.
Hello. Non-market related item for me this evening. Staff has prepared a renewed agreement for marketing and promotion services with Visit Champaign County. President and CEO Jane DeLuce joins me this evening. Thanks for coming, Jane.
Thank you.
This agreement follows the format of the approved FY15-16 agreement adopted June of last year. The total amount budgeted for the current fiscal year at 16-17 is $10,000. That will renew the city's gold sponsorship level and guarantee a position on the VCC board. As the proposed agreement is identical to the agreement entered into between the city and VCC last fiscal year, I won't get into too much detail, but would like to offer Jane a few moments to speak and show you this great new visitor's guide that's hot off the press.
I'll actually come back in the fall and do our annual report. So tonight I just wanted to pass these out. It is the new visitor's guide, of which we have 70,000 copies. I think you'll really enjoy, especially the new cover. And along with the Gold Partnership, Natalie alluded to having a board member, and I would like to publicly thank Natalie. She has been a terrific board member, and she well represents the city of Urbana. The partnerships that have gone beyond just the normal marketing and promotion have extended a lot into the market at the square and other types of projects that we're working on, so Natalie's doing a terrific job. The other thing is within the visitor's guide, you will see lots of things that are telling our story about outside of ordinary, the outside of ordinary branding that we think of this community. In it, I think I'm most excited about the feature on our Illinois-made makers. So you'll see a feature, actually 4-page spread on our artisans across the greater Champaign County area. And the reason I say greater Champaign County area is you will see one focus from Monticello. Both Monticello and Arthur are 2 new regional partners of ours, so we have added to our menu. The other two items that are the attachments within your visitor's guide, one, you'll see different images that are related to, it's a 2-sided, and it's kind of the slicker postcard, and that one is twofold. One, it's representing billboards that we are using. We have an in-kind partnership, so you will see some of those featured locally to tell the story of our outside of ordinary community. And secondly, it also promotes our upcoming fall meeting, of which we will bring in the CVBs from around the state for educational component and showcase our area in October. So that was the invite that we used for that. The other one, which I had sent an email about, but just a reminder, is we are hosting the first ever tourism summit next week, August 16th and 17th. And it is a way that we are trying to engage the entire hospitality industry. We have started a hotel partner program, of which we have hotels from both the Champaign and Urbana areas. But with this, we need to further engage our restaurants, our retail, our attractions in a greater way. We're actually bringing in a national speaker from our national association. It's not both days, it's 2 identical sessions, so one on the 16th, one on the 17th that will be identical sessions. So we're encouraging as many businesses. This is about everybody working together to tell that story and to drive business here. And so we encourage, if you know of business owners or you yourself would like to attend, we would love to have you there as well. So that's the Tourism Summit. You have the new Visitor's Guide, and thank you for your ongoing partnership.
Okay. Thanks very much. Are there comments or questions at this time? Yes, Diane Marlin.
I'd like to thank Jane very much. I think you're doing a terrific job, and Natalie for representing us. And I think we should point out that the cover of the Visitor's Guide features the SIP Yard in downtown Urbana, which is an amazing photo opportunity. So this is a brand new space. So thank you for that. I have two questions. What is an adaptive sport, and what is a non-traditional sport that you're promoting?
Adapted sport would be for persons with disabilities. So so it could be one of the areas that we're actually looking at is called a beep baseball, and that is for people who play baseball that are blind. And if you haven't seen that, it's unbelievably amazing to see how that they do that. So that's one aspect. And then the non-traditional sports, we have a major focus on trying to not be all things to all people, and so looking at archery, which has become popular in this area, and trying to bring in tournaments that aren't your traditional basketball, softball, football, those kinds of things. So the non-traditional sports, one of the ones that we're going to be announcing is one that's actually with bags. So like they call it cornhole, but actual bags that are professional bag throwers. And I know, it's amazing. We're actually going to bring people in from all over the country in November for that one. So those are your what you think of non-traditional sports.
Okay. And I had one other question.
Go ahead.
With the construction of the Kickapoo Rail Trail, will your organization be focusing on specifically promoting that, or making plans for promoting that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been in the planning meetings to that so far. We've included that in our strategic plan efforts, and currently working with both the Forest Preserve and the Urbana Park District in regard to what the first steps are going to be, and also the Village of St. Joe for what they're going to do. So we've been working very closely with the organizers with that, and very excited about that project moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Others? Charlie?
I just want to add in the same comments that Diane made, and add simply that the Kickapoo Rail Trail should open up next June or July. I think the riding community would like to organize a ride in celebration of that, and so I hadn't thought of turning to you for some help for that, but clearly you're a link to the folks at St. Joe on doing something like that. So please keep that in mind, and we'll come up with something. There is no longer. There used to be a ride that was out of Ogden that went to Kickapoo and came this direction, Homer Lake, and that Ogden Lions ride, and that no longer exists. And this may be a perfect opportunity to bring something back along those lines. And I know St. Joe is really looking forward to having the trail there, and the other communities that are further to the west, to the east, I'm sure are equally anxious. As is the riding community. So it will be a real nice addition. And for those who are familiar with Bloomington Normal, they've got the Constitution Trail, I think it's 26 miles now of rail trail through their two communities. It's an incredible asset, and if we can get started and do something similar here, it'd be a really great addition to Champaign County.
Great. So any comments or motions? And Aaron?
Yes, there's some horse riders who would also like to go on that trail ride. So hopefully we'll have it so that it's available for people to ride horses and stuff, not just bikes. But thank you, Jane, for what you're doing very much, and thank you for your representation as well.
And then, okay, Bob, or Bill, sorry.
I was going to just make a motion to move resolution number 2016-08-049R to City Council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a second by Diane Marlin. Any other discussion or recommendation? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you so much. Just a minute. All right, we're going to go down to number 9, ordinance number 2016-08066, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 20, Article 3, 4, and 5, proposed revisions of the city right-of-way ordinance. we'll get back to that one. Well, I'll do this one and then we'll do liquor ones. Because we also have somebody waiting in the audience for this.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to talk about some proposed revisions to the city's right-of-way ordinance. I'd like to start out by thanking Kurt Borman and legal for all the work that he's put on this. He's put a tremendous effort into it. But what you've got before you here tonight are some revisions to the right-of-way ordinance that was adopted in 2014 based on some of the construction experience we've had over the past year. As you'll note in the memo, we had 5 fiber optic utilities working within the city of Urbana right-of-way in 2015. So we did kind of learn through experience a couple of things that we wanted to add on to the right-of-way ordinance that we thought would improve communication with residents and, hopefully maybe speed up some of the restoration process. So what you've got before you is kind of broken into 6 sections. And I'll kind of go through each one briefly. If we want to go through them in more detail, we can. But Section 1 would be revised to prohibit the deposition of excavation spoils in the right-of-way. This would keep from large dirt piles being left in the parkway following any utility excavations or boring activities. Section 2 would require the utility to notify the adjoining properties of utility installation. One of the issues we saw during 2015 is a lot of times residents had no idea who was working, within the right-of-way in their front yard, especially with the multiple utilities operating. As part of that, too, we would require signage to actually be posted out in the right-of-way, so residents would be able to see who was working and have contact information with that particular utility if any problems arise. Section 3 would add a new section on one-dig utility coordination to try to limit the number of repeated installation activities at a specific right-of-way location. I'll point out this is kind of a voluntary, to a certain extent, of trying to get the utilities to get all their work done within a limited time frame. So we don't have, coming through every 6 months a different utility company doing an excavation. Section 4 would require the city arborist to be contacted if any tree roots of a parkway tree is gotten into that's over 1 inch in diameter. Obviously, we're concerned about the health of the city street trees and want to limit damage to them by utility installs. Section 5 would reduce the time that an excavation is allowed to remain open, reducing it from 10 days, which it currently is in the ordinance, down to 48 hours, unless it's authorized and approved by the city engineer to remain open longer. Obviously, open excavation is a hazard, and the quicker we can get those closed up and restored, I think it benefits everybody in the community. Section 6 would add a requirement for any excavations that remain open on streets and sidewalks for more than 48 hours that they have an appropriate surface restoration done, a temporary one, so either filling the hole with rock up to the surface so that people can traverse it, or possibly putting metal plates over it if it's out in the street or on the sidewalk for people to be able to cross it. I'll notice that this would be effective for new license agreements and franchise agreements, as well as any of the existing franchise or license agreements that had written into it that they had to follow the city's current ordinance requirements. We would notify, if this passes, we would notify the utilities about the changes via postcard and email, and we don't anticipate there to be any fiscal costs to the city for adopting it. No additional staff is anticipated to be able to implement the proposed amendments. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, and we do have one person from the audience who's going to also want to comment. We can do have questions now from City Council. Charlie?
Yeah, 2 things, Brad. Trying to understand actually the very first item, which is the any excavation spoil material or any material, waste material, blah, blah, blah. That's in Section 1. I saw ITV3 crews doing a really nice job of excavating and restoring when they went through, and they excavated onto canvas. They laid tarps down and stuff, and they excavated onto canvases, put plants to one side, and then they put it all back. Is that still allowed here?
Yes, that would be allowed. What this would prevent is from digging a utility excavation and just piling the soil up and leaving it, over a long time. There is some settlement that occurs when they put the, material back in the hole, but we've seen some instances where, piles of soil have been left in the parkway sometimes for months, and much higher than what you would typically see as a settlement rate, kind of creating an unsightly mess for people to look at.
Okay, and then the other one is, is section 3 here, which is in black, not blue, is that new, or did we simply, when we passed this in 2014, was it already in here?
No, that's new. That's the one dig policy.
Okay, this is the one dig policy. Okay, and so, yeah, Mike, I've read it a couple of times. I think I understand it. This is pretty quick turnaround on this, so I'm very impressed. It wasn't that long ago that we talked about this.
Well, the thanks should go to Kurt. He's
Okay,
the one that
so
put it together.
I take it that this is built on. You've seen this from other places, or is that you researched it and just found what works in other places? Then, so yeah, okay, great. I'm very impressed with this section. Thank you.
Diane?
Well, I'm most concerned about the Section 3 as well, but based on what I saw happening on Florida Avenue, where fiber optic was installed by 3 or 4 different companies on the same stretch in the same 1-year period, which was a disaster as far as the homeowners were concerned. So how does Section 3, if it's all voluntary, how will that prevent a sequential thing from happening again like that?
Well, the way it's written is the utilities have to provide a plan by December 1st of their upcoming construction to the city, and then there's a meeting that's held after that to kind of coordinate construction schedules. So the utilities are aware of the work that each other is planning and where it would be possible to maybe do multiple installations within one project corridor. That could be coordinated as part of that meeting. The kind of the enforcement mechanism of it is, and there's a bunch of exemptions to this, but if the utility company came in an area where another utility had already done work, the city engineer can deny a right-of-way permit for up to a year. So if, company ABC comes in and installs their fiber optic along Florida Avenue, and then 6 months later, company XYZ came in and, hadn't provided notification and coordinated their schedule, the city engineer could deny a right-of-way permit for up to a period of 1 year.
Can you require them to follow the same route as a previous utility? Because on Florida Avenue, you had one company going under the sidewalk, one company going in the right-of-way, I think another company going on the other side of the sidewalk, and
That's a great question, and I think there's a pretty complex answer to it. I might defer to Kurt a little bit because there are some limitations as far as what we can do with requiring them to use like the same conduits.
I'm not even saying the same conduit, but just the same location.
As part of the permitting process, Public Works does have the ability to direct where certain things are going to be. If they want certain facilities to be on one side of the street or another, for example, they'll say that's what the plan has to be. They'll say you can't use the west side of the street, it's too congested over there, and they'll say, we'll approve it, but you have to be on the east side of the street. So they can, Public Works has some control in the permitting process.
But how about on the side of the sidewalk? That's where the problem was. It was
as part of the plans, Public Works has some degree of control over where the facilities are going to be installed. If this is our right of way, so they have the ability to say how deep it has to be and where it has to be and so forth.
Now, a point on Florida Avenue was we do not have control over the backyard easement, so we would not have been able to exert control as far as what's done with that. That's an easement in the backyard that was written for a general utility easement. So the city doesn't have regulatory power over
Well,
that.
no, this is front yard along the
Yeah,
street.
but within the right-of-way, yeah, we can control where that goes, where the utility is installed, and we would approve their plans, you know, that showed it. The challenge on Florida Avenue was there is no right-of-way on the south side of the street, so unfortunately,
Right.
all the utilities had to go on the north side, which made for a really cramped corridor, utility-wise.
Okay. Well, this is an improvement for sure.
All right, and now we do, Charlie, do you have a question, or I'm going to ask for...
and just as I think about the timing here is my concern. You know, talk about a December planning, and wearing my UCTB board member hat, and thinking about how neighborhoods and sectors are being planned for in that context. This won't exactly work for some minor type development. You know, I can think of a number of areas of town where there is no fiber, and it might not be known until only a couple months before they're ready to go, that they'd want to be in that neighborhood. So in that kind of a situation where there's there may be a contractual responsibility to start building, for example, under the current ITV3, you know, the neighborhood hits 50%, they've got only X number of weeks, depending on weather, to start laying fiber. That won't work under that contract language won't work under this scenario. So that's the one issue I'm having here. Yet it is because of fiber that we that we need this policy. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around that conflict, and something I may talk to Kurt about how to work with that provision.
Okay, and Kurt, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, in Section 3 of the ordinance, under subsection B1, the very end, last sentence or two, it does provide an alternate means. It does provide that if you don't know a year in advance what you're going to be doing, this ordinance does allow you to file an amendment when you are aware of the work. So you're not going to be penalized for that. If you don't know what it's going to be 12 months in advance, but you find out 10 months later that you have to do some work, this allows you to file any amendments to the information filed in your original plan.
Oh, good. Okay. Like I said, I only read it twice, and so it takes a while to settle in. Thank you.
Well, and to kind of follow up on what Kurt said, there are a number of exemptions. Obviously, if there's an emergency, repair, that would be exempt from that. I'm looking at some of the other ones here. If the delay would cause an inconvenience to the public, that requirement would be waived. So, I think there's been a good faith effort made to try to think of contingencies that might come up that would have to work around that.
Maybe at this time we could have public input from one of the individuals who'd like to also speak to it. Peter Folk.
Hi there, Peter Folk, representing probably Vola Broadband. I come to you fresh, though definitely not literally, from the trenches, almost literally, of right-of-way construction in actually Champaign in this case, and I have a very practical view on ordinances of this type. To me, companies are kind of like surfers. We ride the waves of the ordinances as they change. We have to adapt, and those are not bad things. It's it's just part of what we do as companies. But sometimes those waves cause other effects on people other than just us. And to me, the concern with some of these minor clauses are really kind of directly what Charlie was talking about our ability to respond effectively to customers who want to get hooked up. There is as far as I can tell in the ordinance, there is an exception for commercial, if there's a contract or something like that, if we don't know about something and we need to satisfy a customer. My reading of it a couple weeks ago was that would take care of most of the situations that we had, but I would ask that the council and the ordinance be very clear, that make it totally plain that if a customer, if we have a customer that signs up and that requires a permit, then we should not be penalized for not having known about that a year in advance. I mean, we cannot predict, and to some extent you don't want us to try and guess every location that we might possibly go to. You want us to limit our construction to the areas where we're actually going to be doing good, and that I'd ask that be clarified by the council, that is definitely covered by the exceptions in the ordinance. I also wanted to speak to some of the issues with regard to scarcity of the right of way. For example, why you might have to go why one utility might go on the inside of the sidewalk and why the other might go on the outside. The city of Urbana has decided that utilities, at least my type of utility, I'm not sure if it applies to all utilities, should be within 5 feet of the right-of-way line. And that's a fairly small area compared to the total right-of-way space. So when we do a survey of what's available, how we're going to run our infrastructure, we're going to say, okay, well, in this area, CCG is 2 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, and there's a gas line or a water line 4 feet from the right-of-way. So we're going to say, okay, we can go at 6 inches from the right-of-way line, and that, or vice versa, and that's what causes the decision about where we're laying out. The ideal would be that everybody runs in the same duct pack and shares that cost equally. The city has other right-of-way ordinance provisions for encouraging utilities to put in extra duct that would then be leased out by the utility or purchased by the city and leased out by the city. To me, the ordinances that you're considering right now are fine, but they put all of the burden on the utility and don't take any of the planning burden on the city. And quite frankly, cities are better at planning than we are. I mean, we're surfers, right? What surfer have you known that's really good at planning? The other right-of-way ordinance says that the cities can require that we put in additional duct at the city's expense, or I don't know all of the details, but as far as I know, it's never been used to cause a multiple duct pack to be put in, and that would be the actual solution to having multiple runs. Otherwise, you're just spreading them out over time, or hoping that the utilities will coordinate effectively. And I can say that of the other utilities that I am aware of, in the situations where we have tried to coordinate with them, often they're not very open to the idea. They'll do what they can to avoid it. Mm-hmm. The last thing is, I received a draft of these changes a couple weeks ago because we have a license agreement that's going through your system, and I would be concerned if other utilities had not been notified of this. I would suggest that you might want to send out a notification, not of the fact that the right-of-way ordinance has been amended, but that it's being considered amending. You can probably, when I'm done, speak to whether that's been done already. But I would hope that it not delay these ordinances, if those ordinances are then going to delay our right-of-way, our license agreement, because that license agreement is already very long in the tooth and urgently needed by us. So that's all I have on this topic, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Are there any comments? Yes, Eric.
So I was thinking before you came to speak, and I'll, you sort of alluded to, it should be possible, and it would certainly be the most efficient thing, to just dig one trench and to provide enough fiber so that different fiber providers could then do the competition from that fiber that's down the right of way to the home, collaborate in the right of way. And so, are there municipalities that have ordinances that have successfully encouraged that kind of arrangement?
So that kind of arrangement was one of the original visions for UC2B. It has not come to happen with our actual, with how UC2B has actually come out. In general, utilities do that coordination from time to time, but they do it not on a fiber basis, but on a duct basis. You may remember that Ted Stevens was made fun of by saying that the internet is a sequence of tubes. Well, in a lot of ways, the internet is a sequence of tubes. And the real estate is that hole in the ground, that's the longitudinal hole under the ground made of high-density plastic polyethylene. So when utilities collaborate on that kind of thing, they don't really collaborate inside a cable, because that's too sensitive. They collaborate by pulling in multiple tubes. That is done. There have been many examples of it. I'm actually surprised. I don't know who all the people who went down Florida were, but I know that at least in that situation, at least 2 companies collaborated on that construction. So that really, you might need to dig deeper into that, because there were at least 2 utilities that shared a common duct pack on that path.
And so presumably they were functioning in an environment, a legal environment created by the city that encouraged that.
I would say they were functioning in a commercial environment that is where it's a lot cheaper to only drill once.
Okay.
We are already strongly encouraged, because it's about 10% more, maybe 15% more to put in an additional tube over the cost of, if you're putting in one tube, adding another one is maybe 10% more, and adding another one is another 10 or 15% more than that, up to probably 4, maybe 5.
So one thing that the city could do is, when somebody is the first company that goes through, we could front the cost of picking up the extra tube or tubes and then lease those to the next company.
You definitely could do that. You have ordinances to support that now that are not being on the table today.
That sounds to me as though it kind of makes sense. I mean, it may be more complicated than I'm thinking of right now, but we sort of have the power, I think, to make that happen, and so I think we should consider that.
If I may add another advantage of that style, with that style of one dig encouragement, let's call it, those ducts are in the ground already in advance, reserve capacity. So if some need comes up at the last minute, which they always do, I mean, no customer wants to call their internet service provider or potential internet service provider and hear that it's going to be 4 months before they can get internet service. That reserve capacity is put in advance, and it's available for use either as a repaired conduit. There have been several times when we wish we had an additional conduit to run a backup line so that we can remove our primary line if we have damage or something like that. It's a much more proactive approach to it. It just requires more from the city is the main challenge with that one.
Okay, thank you then for that input. The mayor.
So you're talking about multiple ducts. Are they all the same depth?
Yeah, they're all. So what I'm mostly referring to is using directional boring. So that uses a pipe that gets spun underground and drills through the ground horizontally. and due to some magic, you can kind of steer that. And then what you do is you pull back multiple ducts instead of pulling back one duct. And so they're literally in the same. It's not a tube of plastic; it's a tube of dirt. So it cuts a hole in the dirt, and then you pull back multiple tubes through that dirt.
So you can just dig a bigger, wider hole than you
dig a
would
wider hole.
otherwise?
Yep.
So do you know other cities around here that are doing it that way?
You know, I'm not in the city business, so I don't
Okay.
know what laws there exist, but I know that utilities do that from time to time when, you know, when we're aware of another company doing something and that other company is willing, because it's a competitive,
Sure.
yeah. So if I'm the only one with duct to a given location, then I have a competitive advantage.
Right.
And we may want to put a duct in somewhere because we may say, all right, we're willing to pay 30% of your cost to add a duct, even though it's only going to cost you 15%. And they may say, no thanks. We'd rather be the only ones with duct in this. So to the extent that that could be encouraged, which, as I said, your existing ordinance actually allows the city to require them to put in additional duct. It may be that your attorneys determined that was unenforceable. I don't know why that's not been used.
Well, thank you for bringing it up.
My pleasure.
All right. So sounds like there's things to consider. So thank you. Do you have more questions, Bill?
Not a question for Peter. I did have a question for staff if other utilities had been notified.
Okay. I think, Peter, you probably thinks.
They have not, Brad. Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to say one more thing about the other sections that are not regarding the coordination. Those are good. I mean, I hate the fact that you're going to make me fill in my holes after 48 hours. That's really aggravating to me. But it's, you know, it's good. It's the right thing to do. It'll be tough, but a lot of the stuff we do is tough. So that's and the signage. I think the only thing that I was concerned about the signage is it seems the signs had to be bigger than I would really want. I'd like to see like the kind you put up for political campaigns and that kind of thing. That seems like a good size. But other than that, the other aspects of these changes, even though they are, you know, putting more on us, they seem like it's a good balance for public need. Thank you very much.
Thanks, then, Peter. All right. So we've had a lot of input on this. There are considerations to ponder. Does the committee of the whole want to make any kind of a motion at this time? Should we keep this in committee? Should we? Yes, Charlie.
I guess I'd like to keep it in committee, find out talk to Kurt a little bit more about some of the language in here and what other options might be, as well as getting information out to other utilities. You know, I want a chance to look at it a little bit more and make sure that everything that we don't have any unintended consequences. So I just assume keep this in committee and talk about it again in a couple weeks.
Okay. I guess that's a motion.
Sure.
Okay. By Charlie, and then seconded by Eric. Other conversation at this time? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll keep that in committee. All right, we'll go back now to the G2 license question that was brought up earlier for the benefit of those people who are in the audience who'd like to be able to go home sooner than later. We'll start with number, we got number 19, 20, and 21, so we'll start with number 19. An ordinance number 2016-08-069, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of G2 liquor licenses for Black Hawk Restaurant Group, LLC, operating as Emma's Eatery at 114 North Vine Street, Suite O. Mary, do you want to lead that conversation?
This is the establishment that started out thinking they were a restaurant. I mean, the company is called Black Hawk Restaurant Group, but we've determined that they're really primarily gambling, so we would like to change the license from a G1 to a G2. And even though it's a G2, they meet the distance requirements in the ordinance.
Is there any conversation? Bill Brown.
Yeah, I remember when we approved this for G1, it was doubtful it was a G1, and I think the Blackhawk representative offered to apply for a G2, and we said, well, we'll keep it at G1 until we determine whether you're a G2 or not. So I think it's reasonable to go ahead and approve the G2. We pretty much knew what it was.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I guess I'd like to make a comment. Bill, would you take the chair?
Sure. Mr. Roberts.
Okay. Well, I do pass this particular establishment almost every day because I live directly south of it in the neighborhood, and I walk up to the shopping mall and Schnucks Plaza, or whatever you would call it. I observe it as being a quiet establishment that usually has 2 or 3 people in it, or maybe 1 person, or sometimes 4 or 5. I didn't ever see anybody trying to eat anything at this establishment, so I really do question the whole concept of the G1 license, because so far in my understanding, maybe there's like 2 establishments in the entire city that actually attempt to serve restaurant food at these locations. And maybe, I'd like to see a conversation about what the point of establishing G2 licenses when we know, or we see, or we believe that they're about to become a request for a G2 instead of a G1. And maybe that's a conversation we can still have. But as of this point, for this particular establishment, it already exists. It doesn't seem to be causing a problem, so I'll support it at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want the chair back.
Okay, I'll take the chair back. Other comments? Okay, Diane Marlin.
Well, I'd like to respond to your last comment. There are bars and restaurants and veterans organizations that have the gaming machines,
Yes, there are.
and by law they can't have more than 5, whether it's in a bar, restaurant, or in a gaming parlor. But I mean, Milo's has video gaming machines, and Boomerangs, I think, has. I mean, there's ongoing Tin Roof.
Bunnies.
I mean, there are ongoing, long-established businesses in Urbana who just added these gaming machines, and they are not going to become solely a gaming parlor by any stretch of the imagination. So we had a few that called themselves restaurants to begin with, and they shouldn't have at from the beginning. But the G1 classification is a valid classification. It's businesses who've just added these machines after they've been in business for many, many years in Urbana. So I do support the 2 classifications, and they're distinctly different.
Okay, thank you. All right, other conversations? Okay, Charlie.
I move to send this council the recommendation for approval.
Second.
Charlie Smythe, seconded by Aaron Ammons. Other conversation? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Ordinance number 2016-08-070, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing the number of Class 2 liquor license for Mala M's LLC, operating as Lindy Lou's Place, 202 West University Avenue. Again, Mayor.
Okay, we've heard from one of the owners, and I think they've done a very good job improving that corner. So I think it's a good idea to give them the license they've been seeking.
Other comments? Okay, Diane Marlin. Oh,
I'm-
go ahead. Yes.
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, Diane Marlin made the motion. Charlie Smythe seconded it. Bill.
Yeah, again, I think when we discussed the zoning variance or whatever it was they needed for parking, I think Mr. Minch was straightforward about what it was for, and we all understood this was going to be a gambling parlor, and they put a lot of investment into it. So I think some of us even thought we might have already approved this one, but so I'm not opposed to this one.
Okay. All right, seeing no further comments, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Seeing none, that it passes, and we'll go forward to City Council. Ordinance number 2016-08-071, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class G2 liquor licenses for Northgate Gaming Incorporated, operating as Lucky Luke's at 1504 North Cunningham Avenue. The mayor, again.
Okay, this is also a new establishment, and they, starting out asking for a G2. I think that it meets all the standards that we have in the ordinance, so I would also recommend this one for approval.
Other comments? Is there a motion? Charlie.
Move to send this council the recommendation for approval.
Second.
And Eric seconded it. Thank you. Other conversation? Bill Brown.
Yeah, this one, I don't know, it's a little bit more problematic just because it's a new one, an expansion, and we've already started turning some down. I do see that it's a little bit more of a commercial corridor, but is real close to Town and Country Apartments, and I assume they received the notice that that this was going to, they're certainly within.
Anybody who was in the 500 feet did.
I think it's 250 feet now. I just wasn't
Well,
sure if they
whatever
were
the ordinance
within
is.
250
I
now.
know we've been sending out notices.
Okay, and if nobody showed up from Town Country Apartments, maybe it's not a big deal to them, but then again, it is summer, and a lot of those are students, so I may change my vote next week, but I don't know. This one's a little bit more of a problem for me. But I think Mr. Kaiser already left, so he can't address another question. Do you know what's there now, or what was there most recently? Does anybody?
Does anybody have that information?
No. Okay, I can try to find out before next week. Thanks.
Okay. Others? Okay. Okay, we have a motion on that. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
Okay, we have one no. Thank you. Democracy at work, you know. All right, let's go back to an earlier section of our agenda. We had skipped an item called salary adjustments, number 8 on the agenda. So I'm going to we're going to bring up ordinance number 2016-08-065, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2016-17, and this has to do with salaries. Yes, Mr. Trent.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this proposal. As the memorandum that was included in your packet noted, this ordinance would revise the annual budget by allocating additional funds for the specified salary adjustments. Overall, the proposed salary adjustments would have no impact on the general fund, as you saw in the fiscal impact statement. There would be a reduction of 1.32% to the motor vehicle parking system fund, or I think it's $7,327. In terms of the CD special fund for the third position, there would be a reduction in that fund, or transfers into that fund of approximately $3,100. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this. I think generally speaking, these salary adjustments represent basically the high caliber of work that's being done by many of our employees, and this in some ways is to recognize that.
And Marlon.
Move that we send ordinance number 2016-08-065 to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Charlie seconded it. Other comments? Charlie.
And I was going to add that I thought the memo was very clear. I appreciate it. It was nice and concise and just right to the point. So I think you stated the case for each one of these very well. So thank you.
Other comments? All right. Those who, let's see. So those indicating that they approve this and would like to send this to council with approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There are none. That goes forward.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next we have number 10 on the agenda, revision to the Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance Manual and Practice. Public Works. Brad.
Thank you. What you've got before you are are some proposed revisions to the manual of practice for the erosion control ordinance. The original ordinance was adopted back in 2007, almost 9 years ago. We have not made any revisions to the manual of practice, which are the application forms, the details, kind of the text descriptions of how things are supposed to be maintained since that original manual of practice was adopted. So what we got before you are 13 items that we're looking at changing. I feel that they're all pretty minor revisions. I do have a PowerPoint I can go through and show you what each one of them involves, but they're fairly small. And the way the ordinance was written is the engineering division, the city engineer has to present 3 copies of the proposed revisions to the clerk's office, which we have done, and then make a presentation to council regarding the proposed revisions. And if council does not object to those revisions, then they're adopted, I think, within 30 days. So that's what we're here for tonight. I'd be glad to go through in greater detail if that's what you want, but I'll leave that up to you. What? Yeah, I'll try to go through them real quick.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
So one of the first changes is we're just adding a different type of berm. This is just a different style than one that we currently have. This is to capture sediment coming off of concentrated flow, particularly in channels. We're also eliminating one of the concentrated flow best practices, which is a diversion berm. Since we adopted this 9 years ago, we haven't had a single project use this, hence we're eliminating it. This was a detail that we had for erosion control. It keeps sediment out of the storm sewer system. We had it in the Class 1, which were the larger sites. We've learned or an experience that we need to do this for the smaller construction sites, the ones between 1 acre and 2,000 square feet. So that's why we're looking at adding that. Same thing with this one. This was a requirement for the larger sites, the Class 1, but we think it's a requirement that also needs to be in for Class 2. For example, when they put in a house foundation, they need to have a place to properly dispose of the concrete truck washout, so we're adding that to the Class 2. This was a combining of a couple of details. These are in lieu of silt fences. It's kind of a lower profile perimeter control called wattles. We made some changes to the manual of practice. We added that they're required to provide an email address to make it easier to contact people, just minor changes to the application. We split, originally the Class 1 and Class 3 details were in the same manual. We split those out to reduce the size of the manual and make it easier for the users. We added some introductory statements. We used to have the IEPA forms included in the document. Obviously, forms age with time, so now we just refer to them on the web. We consolidated some details for our sample erosion control plans. We added some additional for the smaller sites, example plans. We updated our sequence summary, which is kind of the steps you go through for erosion control. And just minor formatting change. We went from a publisher format to a Word format, make it easier to edit the documents in the future. Did all the drawings in AutoCAD, consistent font and style throughout. And that's pretty much it. So like I said, they're fairly minor. We don't think it'll really add any cost to any of the erosion control activities. They're just kind of more lessons learned by our experience over the last 9 years that we wanted to update and incorporate into the manual of practice.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Brad? Charlie?
Looks good to me. Do we just, what's the appropriate motion here?
Well, there actually isn't any ordinance or motion. It's just if you have any objections to it, we would have to make revisions.
I have no objection.
Thank you.
All right. So, yes.
I talked to the city clerk's office about this, and the preference is that you pass a motion because the city clerk would like to reflect that in the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, so just a committee level is sufficient. Okay, so I'll move that there's no objections and the changes are acceptable.
I'll second that.
Okay. Charlie made the motion, Eric seconded it. Any other conversation about that? Seeing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? There are none. That is approved.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That seems appropriate too, yes. Thank you very much, Curtis. Ordinance number 2016-08-067, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 11, Section 1162, concerning nuisances specifically identified. Scott Tess.
Good evening. I'd like to start my brief remarks by directing your attention to the end of this memo. There's a couple of photos here that show what our purpose is with this ordinance amendment. We have alleys that are increasingly narrow year after year as vegetation slowly encroaches upon them. Now, the city code already obligates property owners to keep vegetation from encroaching upon sidewalks, and what we're proposing is to simply add explicitly alleys, streets, and bike lanes to that same section of the code. This would help direct staff in what they have authority to, or clarify for staff what they have authority to enforce, and would also clarify for property owners what their expectations are for them.
I appreciate that because I've actually had recent complaints in my neighborhood on this very topic. Okay. Any questions for our staff? It's Charlie.
Yeah, so Scott, the one thing that popped out to me was, when you look at the pictures, you see a row of telephone poles. Those telephone poles are usually there by easement. Where, when the alley goes down, does the city own 1 feet out from, what's the right of way associated with the alley? Is it just the alley itself, and literally there's zero ground beyond the alley itself that is owned, so the city owns nothing beyond the paved part?
Correct. The edge of the alley, my understanding is the edge of the alley is the edge of city property. There is no right-of-way as in along a street.
Okay, so literally the homeowner
Correct.
is responsible for keeping that trim back then. Okay.
What we want to do is clarify that.
Mm-hmm. I was just wondering if the city was responsible for having to send something through.
Bill Bray, did you want to expound further?
Clarify, alley right-of-way widths can vary from 10 to 20 feet. A typical alley might be 12 feet wide. The alley width, as Scott mentioned, typically is at full width, but just to be clear, it can vary from location to location. So the actual physical right-of-way width may be beyond the edge of the stone alley. But these pictures are good examples. The point is well made, but I just want to clarify that width can change a little bit depending on what part of the town you're in.
So that a citizen may have to actually have staff check to see what the current right-of-way is and whether...
We do that as a matter of course.
Yeah.
And if we have to get a surveyor, we have staff that has those expertise. But generally speaking, it's pretty well defined, and Scott's staff knows where that is. There's markers to determine it.
And we don't use alleys for laying fiber optics? If we have right-of-way?
Can.
We could.
Can.
Okay. Any other questions? Charlie.
Move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. The Charlie and Eric team will at work here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're formidable.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
We are hungry.
All right.
And
Yes.
Councilor Roberts, if I may, I'd like to just briefly report back that our Solar Urbana-Champaign program has successfully concluded, and I wanted to share that we conducted 24 solar power hours throughout the county. We had 400 contacts and leads for solar installations. We had 140 site assessments for solar installations. And we had 81 contracts signed for new solar installations throughout Champaign County. Wow. That's a total of 605 kilowatts of contracted capacity. So by way of comparison, about 2 years ago, Chicago conducted a similar bulk purchase of solar program and installed 600 kilowatts of capacity. So we had one of the most successful programs in the country on its own merits, and then if you think per capita, really successful. So wanted to share that. Also, the US EPA just named Urbana as one of its green power communities. That's a recognition of our purchase of green power through municipal electric aggregation. We're ranked 16 in total green power purchasing among the 61 communities recognized by US EPA.
Incredibly interesting news. Congratulations to us, I think, right?
Right.
Bill Brown.
And then, did you also have a RFP out for like district solar or something? Did anybody respond to that, or is that still open?
Yes, we had an RFP close for the installation of a solar array at a city facility, and we received 2 bids. We're evaluating those bids presently and hope to make a decision soon.
Thank you.
Okay, Ed Mayor.
Well, I want to thank Scott for doing such a great job.
Yes,
We are a green city, and you're really helping us a lot. Thank you.
Good staff leads to good results. All right, let's go back to vegetation and obstruction of alleys and bike paths. Any further information or comments? Seeing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That goes forward to City Council. Resolution 2016-08-050R, a resolution approving a City of Urbana Community Development Block Grant Program Agreement with Champaign County Regional Planning Commission Youth Assessment Center, project number 1617 CSSP-01. And our community development person, and I just blanked your name, I'm sorry.
Kelly.
Ellie. Kelly. I don't know why I did that, but there you go. Thank you for helping.
So before you are 2 resolutions, also the number 13, which is approving social service funding CDBG agreements, one with Regional Planning Commission Youth Assessment Center, and the other with persons assuming control of their environment or PACE, their personal assistance program. These 2 agencies meet the priorities for funding selected by Community Development Commission for the CDBG Public Service Social Service funding, seniors or youth, homelessness, and special needs population. The Youth Assessment Center meets the youth priority, PACE, personal assistance meets the homelessness and special needs population priorities. At its July 26th meeting, the Community Development Commission reviewed the agreements and voted unanimously to approve them and forward the resolutions to council for approval.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Diane Marlin.
No, I'll just forward resolution number 2016-08-050R to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay. Diane Marlin, seconded by Charlie Smythe. Any other questions or comments? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? None. Okay, that's forwarded. And we just heard a resolution number 2016-08-051R, a resolution approving a City of Urbana Community Development Block Grant Program Agreement with persons assuming control of their environment, yay, PACE, personal assistance, project 1617-CSSP-02. And then Kelly had covered that. Charlie?
Move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay.
Second.
Eric? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? There are none. That's forwarded also. Okay, next comes Resolution 2016-08-038R, a resolution approving home loan documents between the Urbana Home Consortium and Highland Green LLC. Again, Kelly?
Yes, and I have Aaron Smith with Homestead here. He's one of the partners for the Highland Green LLC, so if there's any questions, he can answer those. So I'm going to talk about also the second number 15 resolution, because we have them in the memo together. So these 2 resolutions, one is approving home loan documents regulatory and land use restriction agreement, mortgage and promissory note, and also a City of Urbana CDBG infrastructure agreement. This is a requirement per low-income housing tax credits to convey both CDBG and home funds as a loan. To implement this project, we need to complete the loan documents as described. This will ensure that both home funds will be used in accordance with our regulations, and the infrastructure agreement specifies the amount of CDBG the city is planning to allocate for infrastructure, and also to make sure that the regulations are being followed. The Community Development Commission at its regular meeting on July 26 unanimously voted to forward both resolutions to council with the recommendation for approval. If any questions, again, and Aaron's here as well.
Right, and we were talking about some significant CDBG improvements, including sidewalks, connectivity routes, and lighting, and a few things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions for Aaron? Is there a motion then? Yes, Charlie.
I'll move to send, I guess we've got two of them here. I'll move to send Resolution 2016-838R to council recommendation for approval.
Second.
Who did it? Eric, did you?
Yes, second.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Further comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay. That's forwarded to council. Okay. And Resolution 16-08-044R, a resolution approving a CDBG infrastructure agreement between the City of Urbana and Highland Green LLC.
Move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second that.
I appreciate that. Further comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And opposed? None opposed. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about some real estate. Ordinance number 2016-08-052. This is item 16 on the agenda. An ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate. This is 401 and 403 East Kerr Avenue. Kelly, can you explain this?
Yes. Yes. This ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 401 and 403 Kerr Avenue. This property has been owned by the city since 2004 for the purpose of affordable housing and anticipation of Highland Green project. The transfer of this real estate will help facilitate this project and also the construction of affordable housing, which has been a goal of the mayor and the city council, as well as also city documents and plans. A public hearing was held on August 1st, 2016 at 7 p.m. as required by the Urbana City Code. At its regular meeting held on July 26th, the Community Development Commission unanimously voted to forward this resolution with the recommendation for approval.
Great.
Any questions?
Okay. Other questions? Bill Brown.
Yeah, and this is sort of unique property because it's relatively undisturbed. I guess there was a farm there some years ago, but there's never really been much construction there. I wondered what sort of cultural resources inventory or regulations are as far as archaeological sites or potential sites go. Is there, since it's going to be funded partly with CDBG money, are there extra requirements for them to check it out first?
Yes, we are required to do environmental reviews on all of our projects that we put federal funds into, CDBG and homes. So we have already done that. It includes contacting the Illinois Historic Preservation and Section 106, and I mean there's all kinds of requirements that we have to do and make sure before we...
They're all done, right?
Yes, it's all done.
Okay.
Do you know if they did any excavation or testing for potential archaeological sites?
I don't think it was required per the Illinois Historic Preservation. I don't think that there was. I have to look at the documents and make sure, but I don't recall that there was anything that stood out that we had to do.
Huh, interesting.
Okay. Thanks.
Good question, I think, because it's always interesting to find out whether there might be historic elements that are worth noting on a property that is developed, if it's under federal guidelines. So yeah, you might be checking for us on that. Thank
I will
you.
do that and let
Okay.
you know.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, I think the real, there is a revised version of the of the ordinance that's on our
yes, it was
desk.
passed
We'll-
out
with a few more
Yes.
sections.
Yes.
I'll point that out, but the real meat of this is in the transfer agreement. And I know this came up earlier, was use of subject property, you know, so item number 4 in that agreement, as I understand it, is what basically requires the construction of the 33-unit affordable rental development that we're selling them this for, and then there's a construction schedule at 11, and which you know, keeps it going, and so I think that's how we're protected, as I understand it, right, Kurt? Yep.
That's correct, and Kelly can also tell you that we're going to have Highland Green LLC execute something called a land use regulatory agreement that says that the land has to be used for this low-income housing, and if they decide to sell it to somebody else without telling us, that person is going to be saddled with the same responsibility. It's going to be recorded against the land. It's going to be it's going to say that that's the purpose of the land.
Yes, that's actually was one of the home loan
Oh, was
documents.
the very
was this
and
land
the
use.
other thing. Oh, okay, great. Okay, so we got several ways of protecting ourselves. Great, thank you.
Great. A long hoped-for goal might
Yes.
be actually
Yeah.
approaching.
Yeah.
Charlie.
I move to send to council a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Diane Marlin is the second. Any other for conversation? Seeing none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That goes to City Council with recommendation of approval. Number 17 on the agenda, resolution number 2016-08-052R, a resolution amending an emergency solutions grant subrecipient agreement with Rosencrantz Time Center for the year 2015-16. Community Development, that would be Kelly again.
Yes. Yes, this resolution amends an agreement that we had previously approved, that you had previously approved on August 17, 2015, for emergency solution funds to be given to Community Elements Time Center. On July 1st, 2016, Community Elements merged with Rosecrans Incorporated to become Rosecrans Champaign-Urbana. The attached amendment allows the agreement to be assigned to Rosecrans CU instead of Community Elements, so that they have one final payment that's due and cannot be paid until proper assignment occurs. So at its regular meeting on July 26th, the Community Development Commission unanimously voted to forward this resolution to council with the recommendation for approval.
So we're basically doing a name change, a recognition?
Yes, that way we can make the final payment to them.
Okay. Charlie.
Yeah, I have no problem with this, and we'll move it in a second, but I know that we're having to look at our social services grant stuff. I know in the township, changes we made there. Do we have any related items that are going through the city on social services where we have to change the names?
No, the only two programs that Rosecrans is through township.
Okay.
There's no other,
Okay.
but there will be emergency solutions grant sub-grantee that will be coming, and so. However, I did contact the Illinois Department of Human Services, who is the one that gets the funding from HUD, and then we applied to them, and they felt that all we had to do was have Rosecrans, formerly known as Community Elements, and that's all we needed on their agreements.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. Okay, well, I move to send to council the recommendation for approval.
I'll second that.
Okay. Seconded by Eric Jacobson. Thank you, Charlie. Further discussion? Seeing none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay, that passes as well. Finally, and somewhat more fun, ordinance number 2016-08-068, an ordinance naming a street, avenue, alley, or other public place, and we're talking about possibly Boneyard Creek Crossing. Alderwoman Diane Marlin.
Well, thank you, Dennis. As everyone will recall, back in November of 2012, we broke ground on the Boneyard Creek improvement, which would be Section 3, I believe, of our corridor plan. And after about an $8 million public investment, we have a wonderfully improved section of the Boneyard, plus we made many, many improvements on Race Street and Broadway Avenue as part of the project. So since then, we've been referring to this section as the Boneyard Creek Improvement Project, which leaves a lot to be desired when you're trying to attract someone to a location. We opened it up to the public a couple of years ago and asked for suggestions for this stretch of the creek, and we got some input. It was clear that the public preferred to refer to this creek by its popular name, Boneyard Creek. There was some interest in things like Silver Creek, or maybe looking for a different, more historical name for the creek, although that was never really determined. But Boneyard Creek is fixed in the public's mind, and it's certainly used all the time. We wanted to make sure that this name, whatever we named this location, is that it actually specified a particular place. This is part of a larger corridor eventually that will be developed. But for events and activities that occur between basically Griggs Street and Broadway Avenue, we wanted to specify a place. And the proposed name, Boneyard Creek Crossing, also refers to the fact that the creek in this stretch of the is crossed by two bridges, one at Race Street and one at Broadway Avenue, as well as the railroad trestle. So I'm proposing that we name it Boneyard Creek Crossing, and I've spoken with all council members, and most everyone has indicated either they're in favor of it or can't think of anything better. So, there we are. So this ordinance officially names the stretch between Griggs Street and Broadway Avenue as the, officially known as Segment 3, is now going to be known as Boneyard Creek Crossing. So for the committee, I move approval of ordinance number 2016-08-068.
Okay, we can have conversation, but does anybody want to second that?
I assume that's a motion to send this to council.
Yes.
Okay. It sounded like you were already at the council there. So I have two comments. Okay, you'll second it.
So Eric is going to second it. All right.
Okay, and I'll just make two comments. I was holding out for trying to come up with the Indian name for the creek, and using that in here, but that doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And my only other comment on this is that if we choose this, we're sort of committed long term, I think, to something like Boneyard Creek Walkway. If we actually do the 5 segments and have a walkway there. And so, just keep in mind that I think it's got a longer term and a broader meaning as we're successful, and if we're successful in getting this all the way to campus or Lincoln Avenue, like I think Dennis and I would really love to see. At some point we have is that a name that will work for the entire stretch? And it is Boneyard Creek, so Boneyard Creek Walkway works for me as a long-term, piece, or concept for this section.
Other comments? Eric.
So I support this, and I'll just put into the record a couple of reasons for it. I have, renewed, I earlier did, and now I've renewed my search for historical references and historical names, and in fact, the historical record's very sparse, so I don't want to overemphasize how reliable it's likely to be. But the earliest putative naming of this waterway was in fact Boneyard, and presumably referred to animal bones that clustered together in the great woods just north of the creek and perished in a horrific winter in the 1830s. And that appears in a couple of places in the sort of anecdotal record. was actually attributed, whether apocryphally or not, but was attributed to Chief Schumacher as the other thing that I like about Boneyard is that it's distinctive. As far as I can tell, there is not another Boneyard Creek anywhere. So we are the Boneyard Creek, as opposed to Silver Creek. There's Silver Creeks all over the place. So, I like the fact that there is at least a plausible, deep historical significance. It's a historical significance that is tied to the natural events in the natural world and to the earliest residents of human residents of this area, and it's distinctive. So, yep, I think it's the right thing to do.
Other comments? Charlie?
All the more reason then to think in terms of Boneyard Creek Walkway.
Can I make a comment then?
Mr. Roberts?
Would you take over the chair, please? All right. So I have a lot of interest in the history of the community, and I like to I like the idea that we're still calling the creek the Boneyard Creek. I know there was an attempt to gentrify the creek at one time, and it didn't really go far, and even the students didn't go for it at the time, who were the university students. So yeah, we are who we are, but it's exciting and it's unique, and I've heard many different proposed names for not only the creek or this area in general, and I'm going to be pretty fussy about it when it comes time to talk about other sections. But I will say that I'm just happy with knowing that Boneyard Creek is the name of the creek that flows through our community. When we continue the walkway, we can talk about maybe a grander plan. I'm not going to commit to Boneyard Creek Walkway at this meeting. I will point out that several earlier years ago, when we had the city's 175th birthday, the city council did create Founders Park, and that is a section of the Boneyard Creek in Section 1, which is yet undeveloped or undesigned officially. But we've already got a couple of sections of the Boneyard Creek that, because of their unique quality and associations with history, I think it's appropriate to name them these different spots with specific names, realizing that in the future we hope to expand the concept of the entire pathway as a multiple use city amenity. So I support the name that Diane Marlin has come up. I think it's an okay name, and we can develop this a lot of different ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so having all said that, other comments or questions? All right. Seeing no other conversation, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed? None noted, so that'll go forward to the City Council with approval. This being the last item on our agenda, I'm going to call adjournment.